Got a great topic today.
A little bit controversial.
Yep, controversial, which is what we love. And like you mentioned earlier when we spoke about it, is like it gives you that little like feeling before you share, which is a good sign that we're on to sharing something worth sharing.
Yeah, I think that's the little hint that it's, if this is pressing on something, or if this feels a little bit difficult, that's because that's where change happens.
Exactly right. And there's been so many examples of how, like when we got talking into this topic, so many examples of where in our own life we had a bit of a chuckle about how we've done exactly this very thing. So it's perfect to share. And like I mentioned to you earlier as well, is I wish that I could gift this realization that we're going to share with you, or this lesson or this nugget or whatever it is at the end. If this could land for everybody who listened, or like if this could be the gift that we could actually give people, it would make such a massive difference to so many people's lives when you can let this land and play with it, with the information, and start to apply it. There's so much available for you on the other side of that. So our challenge to you when you're listening to this is, can you be open-minded and just willing to explore what we're talking about and not just shut it down, but actually just see how it lands, and then coming back to it where it might start to make a bit of sense. Yeah, absolutely. And then you can do with it whatever you wish at the end of listening to it. You can do with the information whatever you wish. But yeah, what we're talking into today is that suffering is voluntary. And when we talk about suffering, do you want to expand on that? Like, there's a broad spectrum of suffering, right?
Yeah. So what we're not doing is dismissing the real experience of trauma and bad stuff happening, right? We're not talking here about people in war zones choosing to be there and wanting to suffer and struggle. So what we want to just be really clear about is that those things are real, and this is not that. What we are talking about is the everyday struggle we have with the things that are coming up, whether it's in our relationships, our businesses, with our children, with ourselves, and wanting to show up and do things differently for our health and our well-being. This is what we're speaking into.
And again, this is not from our, like, having listened and heard somebody else share this theory and then now we're sharing it too. Like, this comes from lived experience, so more in like the daily suffering of life, and Charlie probably on a deeper level. You're the overachiever, so you're going to do things slightly a little more hardcore.
I like to take it to the extreme. Yeah, and so I guess for me, the first time this concept was introduced to me, I'm not going to lie, I was pretty angry that I was choosing to suffer. And I got so angry, I actually stormed out of the session I was in and raged for quite some time, days afterwards, around the absurdity of this, that like, how could I be choosing to be depressed and to feel so like hopeless and to be struggling so much. And it was, and I was going round and round between the anger of what this person had said to me, and it was like, well, they just can't possibly understand my struggle, right? They can't understand how difficult it's been for me. Round to like, wow, look how messed up you are, that you're choosing to do this. You're choosing to see your life the way that you do, and that it's all such a struggle. And so I was circling round and round, ruminating, really just getting into it as I love to do.
It's totally challenging.
Totally
Everything.
challenging.
Like, big question mark over your whole life.
Yeah. Especially when so much of your struggle becomes part of your identity. And yeah, I guess losing my mum at 14 became a big part of my identity. And so what was being asked of me to really consider this was to start to loosen and let go of some of those those things that as much as they were causing me distress, I kind of held them close, and it was a difficult. And in that struggle of like coming to terms with the simple fact that I was choosing to create this struggle, I saw it in that moment. Like, it was like, oh my God, there it is. There's the pattern, right? Look at me, whirling around from like the anger at someone else and how dare they and what they don't understand, and then beating myself up and being so critical and being like, oh my God, like how messed up are you? You're so broken. And then just whirling back around, because that doesn't feel very good, as you can imagine, back to the anger and blame someone else. And, and as I was like, wow, okay, this is a pattern. It's not me.
Oh, how good! Like to have that realization. When did you have that realization? Was that when you were in rehab, or was that? Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, it was. Had nothing else to do but spend a hell of a lot of time,
in the mirror. Not the actual.
There's not a lot of us, there was no other escape, right? So it was like, and so.
That's the point of it, though, right? Like
100%, 100%. That is exactly, it's like, are you willing to? And I wasn't. I'm not going to lie at first, but really start to question the narrative I was living out of, and start to come to terms with the lens I was seeing life through. And like, that's, and the radical personal responsibility, that like, okay, well, if I am choosing to stay here in this story, as familiar and justified as it feels, how is it making me feel? Like, is it serving me? Is it helping me live a joyful, fulfilling life? Or is it keeping me stuck?
And those are some big questions to actually be even open to asking yourself, and then asking yourself, and then being honest enough to answer them. Like, it's incredibly, I always just feel so inspired, and it's so courageous to actually offer yourself that opportunity to look at those answers, because it is the difference between, that's identity shifting, like offering yourself the opportunity to break away from what you've created, and what has potentially been created for you. And a child who loses their mother, you're now the girl with no mum, or like you're now the girl we have to be quiet and kind and careful around, or like we get passed on all of these identities and things as well, right? And it's like, great, well, I will live that out then, if that's what you want for me. Like, unconsciously, that's what you're choosing again, right? I saw this really cool quote the other day, and it was like, if you don't give yourself the opportunity to, or if you don't learn about yourself, or spend enough time learning with yourself, you'll absorb the identity that everybody else has given you. And it's like, that's exactly what I'm hearing you say there, right? Is like just living out that identity, the stories and the things that had been passed on to you, and then that you'd created for yourself as well.
Yeah, all these meanings I'd attached to my life, and then what that, how I then started to almost create the version of me that needed to then fit into that, right? Or what does that mean I need to do, or how do I need to be? And I think it's the waking up from the story, right? Like, and again, I love to, I share my story specifically because I like to ground this in something that's real for people, because, obviously hear these sorts of things about like waking up to the reality of things, or waking up from the slumber of like being caught in, ego and stories and things. But it genuinely is when you can slow down and actually look at a particular situation. So for us, a very live example of this is the challenge we have with one of our daughters eating. And it's honestly, I'm embarrassed sometimes when I really reflect on this, and it's a bit of a joke, because for 8 years we have been struggling with her eating. And there's nothing wrong. My daughter's perfectly healthy. She's certainly not malnourished or in any way would anyone go, this kid doesn't eat well or eat enough or anything like that. So what's the real problem? And the real problem is my definition or the meaning I'm attaching to my child not eating normally or in some definition that, and what does it mean about me as a mum? And what am I taking from my own past experiences and projecting out forward into her future and creating all of this worry for myself that like, and therefore again bringing it back around to I'm not a good enough mum. And you know, it's one thing to be able to sit with it and see it, but to actually then start to do something different about it, because this is not saying that people's experience isn't real, because it's very real. I can tell you that when you've got to feed your kid 3 times a day and pack their lunchbox every day, and you're doing that for 8 years, and it's a struggle. It's hard. But what is hard? To actually start to focus into what is really going on here, and slow down enough to, and then be open to, right, to be asked the questions. Because Jeff and I sat here and it was like, well, what's really going on here?
Because the fact of it is, like, as an outsider coming in who has no emotional attachment to it, like I see 2 beautiful, healthy, bubbly, energetic, sporty, smart girls, perfectly healthy. Like from the outside, I don't see them eating or whatever, but like there's nothing wrong with them. Do you know what I mean? And so many times, like when you actually sit with the reality of the situation, there's nothing wrong with what, you know, there's nothing bad happening, nothing wrong. Like it's a perfectly, whatever, it is what it is. She's healthy, she's fine. But like you say, it's the meaning that you've attached to her not eating the way you expected her to eat. It's the meaning you're making of not being the mum that you thought you were going to get to be by probably making beautiful, homemade, nourishing food that you make, and then it just gets denied or whatever. Rejected. Yep. It's the story that of, you know, how you grew up and potentially what happened for you during your childhood. Like you say, that you're projecting onto her future, which isn't even a reality right now. And so this is where we're saying this is what creates the suffering, is that it's not the actual situation right now, because the situation right now is completely fine, quote unquote. She's not unwell. She's living her life like any other normal child would. The problem is what's going on inside of you, and
it's how I'm choosing to experience it.
And how have you been trying to fix it for 8 years?
Well, by, you know, I guess reverting back to especially like the way I would have been parented, right? Which is like, well, we're gonna put some expectations here and some rules around it, and then if there's failure to comply, then there's punishment, right? So, you know, if you don't eat the food, then I'm gonna take away the treats, or if you know, and so creating more and more pressure on a particular part of our life that has led to my child doubling down on the control, because she's like, hell no, you're not forcing me. And the fact is, we've never been able to force her. And so it's quite hilarious, because it's also absolutely against who I am, how I believe I want to actually parent, you know, how I struggled being rebellious because I was, you know, I felt so controlled, and yet here I am doing the very same thing to my daughter. And, you know, I guess I know now that I don't have the same shame attached to some realization like that I would have before. I would have been like, oh, you see, that just proves the point that I am a shit mum. Because, again, that's just allowing myself to go in the spiral. So it's like, stay here, stay with us. Like, here's the facts, you know. And then being able to, with that compassion to myself, I can sit with something that's quite hard. Like, because it's like, oh, sounds pretty dumb, right? To keep applying something that I didn't like, and then I've been doing it for 8 years and it still hasn't done
how many
anything.
different variations of the punishment scenario, and you know, like the we'll just change the rules, we'll change the metrics, we'll change the strategy a bit, still the same strategy, but we'll just play around with the like...
Still the same fundamentals, right? Of like, this situation feels out of control, I'm going to try and control it.
More, yeah.
I'm going to double down on the control. And actually, what I know now is that the harder I tried to control things in my life, the harder it felt, the more I struggled, and I at no point had any control. I was just exerting my energy towards something that was absolutely futile.
And so if you can't change her, like, because that's what you're trying to do, right? You had in the past was trying to change something outside of yourself, which you have no control over her. So what can you do about it?
I can sit with my experience of it, and I can unpack that, which is exactly what I sat and did with Jeff last night. Slowly, was we were just like, okay, well, what's the real problem here? And I was like, well, I'm a bad mum because I don't feed my child well, or she doesn't eat. And he, you know, Jeff, in his man of few words, was like, when did you decide you were responsible for that? I was like, I don't know. Aren't mums responsible for everything that their children do or don't do? Beautiful. Here we go.
Let's open that.
Let's, you know, and then it's okay, and you know, worried about other people's judgment about, you know, what she does or doesn't eat, and suddenly just sitting with just for 10 minutes, I could see that, hang on, there's so much here that's all, like me. It's all about my expectations of myself, the definitions I'm putting on what is or isn't a good mother, the meanings I'm attaching to, has nothing to do with my daughter. And that is so much more powerful, because suddenly I realize there's something I can do about that, because I can choose how I show up in my life. I can choose how I navigate things. That is one thing I do actually have control over. Can't do anything about anyone else. And in that, you know, in there is all this spaciousness, right? To suddenly, like, all of this possibility, because, hang on, I know how to do this work. I've been here before with other things. And so then there's just like a freedom, and it takes so much pressure off from this, like, really pulling it all down, kind of like sitting there with how we're going to control, or what are we going to, you know, how are we going to do this? To suddenly, like, oh, hang on, I get to revisit and see if I can loosen some of these these rules I'm making. Because when I really sat with it, what was the most important thing? Well, that my child is well, and that I have a deep and meaningful relationship with her, and I'm safe for her. All of the rest of that stuff is just noise.
Yeah, absolutely. And like what I'm hearing in that is you took suffering, a problem that was creating suffering for you and pain, and turned it into possibility by actually seeing what the real problem was. And we talk about this, like, creating, the problem is not the problem, it's the quality of the problem. Like, the problem that you had at the start was like, how can I stop being such a shit mum? Not a great problem. The problem you have now is like, how can I show up? Or how can I make what's most important to me, which is our relationship, stronger? And what's my role to play in that?
And how immediately different that drops into, and how that feels in your body. Because the simple fact is that all of this time that I've been attempting to do it a certain way that I perceived it needed to be done, I have struggled so much with it. It has felt horrendous. And yet I would keep persisting with it. But as soon as you take that like, all of that weight of the responsibility of having to make it happen away, and then what I simply get to focus on is loving my daughter, seeing her, validating her, like, all day, every day. Thank you. Yep. Sign me up.
Can you imagine how different it's going to be for her when she does decide that she might want to try something different or eat a different way, rather than you being like, well, I told you so, and like, or if she does get unwell or whatever. It's like you're there with capacity and space and love and compassion, and like seeing her, like how much more likely she's going to be to actually follow through with those choices or be more open because it's safe for her to do it. Not like shivers. I don't want to even murmur that I might want to try something else because I'm going to be forced. The pressure. Yeah, huge, right? And this is not just like, this is one scenario. Like we do this in so many scenarios in our own lives. Like,
oh my gosh,
it's not just, this is not just a Charlie problem.
Or a parenting problem, right?
Yeah,
For people who don't
exactly.
necessarily have children. It's like, no, this, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so it's, again, it's then being able to sit, and hence why I had already started to loosen up the rules a bit in other places, so that when I come around to something that's quite sensitive, my parenting, a lot more sensitive than a bunch of other things that we do, right? So when you land in somewhere where it's going to be more highly charged, because it's so much more important, you can navigate that with a little bit more kindness. And yeah, so it's essentially, what are we coming back to is like, well, the problem's not the problem. And are you willing to sit with what you think the problem is and slowly unpack it?
And zoom out a bit, like from what you think the problem is, giving yourself some space to actually zoom out and look at what really is happening here, beyond the surface of how what the story is basically that you've created. Like, where is that story coming from? What meaning am I attaching to the outcomes that are happening? Because when you can, that's really where it is. The stories and the meanings and the experiences that we've had in the past that have created those stories and meanings. That's really where the work is.
And what's really important to note here too is that is the innocence of it.
Of course.
There's a positive intention behind all of our behavior, and I'm not trying to be a vicious, controlling mother. What I want for my child is health and wellness, and to love herself the way she is, and blah 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 blah, like a whole bunch of other things that's got nothing to do with how I'm going about it is a bit of a misunderstanding and is clearly ineffective, and is creating a toll that I'm no longer prepared to pay. And I think that's the linchpin, that moment when you realize the suffering you're creating from whatever experience in your life it is, the work colleague that drives you nuts, the boss who's, overbearing, the needy client who just won't give you space, whatever it is, whatever the scenario is, it's like, if you're prepared to sit and be curious in what's actually going on, what's the dynamic here, what's the meaning I'm making about this scenario.
And ownership. Like, how have I created this for myself? That's such a huge question, because we have to take 100% responsibility for how we're showing up in our lives, because every problem, I would argue, we've created for ourselves.
100%.
Yeah. And the difference being, depending on your mindset, which is the first level that gives us the awareness, right, is like, are you looking at it from being a victim or a creator? And that's exactly what you've done. Like, you went into this scenario as the victim to the situation, and now you've flipped it to being the creator. Like, you've taken all of your personal power back by taking full responsibility for how you're showing up. And that means that you don't have to play to the beat of that drum anymore. You can create your own. Like, you're now creating solutions and that feel really aligned and alive and supportive and actually fulfilling what you value, which is your relationship with your daughter. Like, that is the priority.
Yeah. And to be clear, I don't have like the specific action steps yet. And, and I am quite comfortable with that. Like, being able to release I need to know the specific strategy to feel like I've found a solution. I've found a solution because of how it feels for me. The realization I've had of, like, hang on, how do I feel when someone's trying to control me and force me? I don't feel good. In fact, I'm pretty stubborn, so I'm going to dig my heels in. And so it's also being able to allow yourself to be like, yeah, I struggle with those kinds of things too. And so connecting with that and then going, well, how would I feel, or how would I want to feel if I'm struggling with something? Well, I want somebody to be able to see that I'm struggling, and maybe just sit alongside me and say, I can see that you're struggling. What do you give me a bit of space to be able to use my creativity and see what I might do differently about it. Shit, I just, there you go. I just told you what my strategy is with my daughter, right?
Yeah.
It's already in there.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. Like, we have all the answers within us. It's just getting clouded by a lot of misunderstandings.
The rules
The rules.
these hidden rules and expectations that we live under.
Yeah, the biggest thing that you could do for yourself, like if you're listening to this and you're like, I love what you're saying, and like my nervous system, like you're feeling that tension of like, no, resistance, like I don't want to do it. The one piece of advice I would say is offer yourself some curiosity. That's all it takes for a start, is start to notice and be curious, like where you are living out of assumptions, rules, things that you've decided for yourself unconsciously that you want to question, like how you need to show up, who you think you need to be, how you need to live, or how other people should be living. Like, so yeah, whatever it might be for you, I'm sure there's something that you're hearing in this and going, oh God, that's the thing.